A man approached an attractive woman in Costco. He said, I've lost my wife here in this huge store, and can you talk with me for a couple minutes? Well, this attractive woman said, why? He said, because every time I talk to a beautiful woman, my wife appears out of nowhere. Our story for today is about a lost son and a father's love. It's about God's grace. It's probably the best known parable of Jesus about God's acceptance of us when we don't deserve it. A man has two sons. Imagine he owns a large, successful farm in the Midwest. They raise hogs and cattle. They also plant 2,500 acres of corn, canola, and soybeans. Both sons have been raised on the farm. The older son went to Purdue. Condolences to Purdue fans. He got a degree in agriculture, science, and a minor in agribusiness so that he could help make the farm even more profitable. He manages the livestock for his father. The younger son dropped out of college after trying 3 different majors. He feels he is always being compared to his perfect older brother. He can't stand life on the farm anymore. After the umpteenth argument with his goody two-shoes brother, the younger son shouts in anger, "I wish Dad were already dead. Then I'd take what's coming to me and leave this place forever." At that moment, their father walks up. He heard the argument and his younger son's comments. He asks him, "Are you really that unhappy here?" The younger son said, "You bet I am. Give me what's coming to me right now, and I'll be out of your hair for good." The father says sadly, "If you're that determined to leave, I will give you your inheritance." The older son says, "No, you can't do that, Dad. What about our employees? We'd have to let half of them go and sell off half the land. And what about the livestock?" The father tells the older son, "It'll be all right. We'll still make it, son." The older brother went on, "You can't listen to this spoiled brat. He only cares about himself. He does not care about you or our family. This farm has been in our family for generations. We may lose it." The father says, "It's okay, son. It's clear that the farm would be divided after my death, and your brother would sell off his half." So the father sells half of everything: his land, his grain, his livestock, his farm equipment. He let go half of the employees. Then he gives the younger son the cash. The young man is ecstatic. He packs his suitcase full of cash and leaves without even saying goodbye. He drives to O'Hare in Chicago, where he buys a first-class plane ticket to Las Vegas. Once he lands, he gets a taxi to the Ferrari dealership and buys a brand new Roadster. He books the penthouse at the casino for 6 months. He keeps his bar stocked with the very best. Within a few days, he has lots of friends and beautiful escorts always at his side. He's having the time of his life. He couldn't be happier. However, before long, his life starts to unravel. He lost his Ferrari in a high-stakes poker game. He loses too often at the roulette wheel and blackjack. He loses too much. He runs out of money and falls deep into debt to the casino. All his friends have disappeared. The casino has put him out on the street because of what he owes. He is hungry and sleeping at the Salvation Army. The casino hires him as a dishwasher, but they take half his earnings to pay off what he owes them. He barely has enough to pay the $12 to sleep at the Salvation Army. He is so hungry, he longs to lick the food he is scraping off the plates. Nobody cares about him. Finally, he comes to his senses. He says to himself, "Maybe Dad needs a hired hand on the farm. Maybe I could stay in the bunkhouse and eat home-cooked meals again. I'll hitchhike home and say to my dad, 'I'm sorry, Dad. I know I've disappointed you. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not asking to be part of the family again. I just need a job and a place to stay. It's early in the morning, and the father's drinking coffee on the front porch as he rocks back and forth in his rocking chair. He sees a figure up the lane coming toward the house in the fog. He recognizes his gait. He springs from his chair, jumps off the porch, almost falls flat on his face. He runs down the lane and grabs his son in a bear hug. The son starts. I know I've disappointed you, Dad. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not asking to be part of the family again. I just need a job and a place to stay. But his dad is not listening. He shouts to his workers to slaughter the prize calf and start the barbecue. He calls to another, my son's cold. Grab my new coat and boots I just ordered from Amazon. They should fit him. Let's celebrate. He calls his sister on his cell phone and tells her to get her band together and come over that evening. Why? There's good news. Her nephew is back home. The one they were sure was dead. They're going to have a big party. The older son has been on the tractor all day, plowing the fields. It's just turning dark. As he nears the house, he hears something over the roar of the engine. He sees all the lights on at the house. There are lots of people inside and outside. The lights are strung between the trees in the backyard. The aroma of barbecue floods his nostrils. He stops and turns off the tractor. When he does, he hears the thumping of a bass drum and the reverb of an electric guitar. He hears people laughing and singing. He sees people dancing on the back deck. One of the workers is coming out of the house. He gets off the tractor and yells, "What's going on?" "Your brother has come home and your dad is throwing a big party. He barbecued the calf you were going to take to the state fair. Your aunt's band is playing. There's all kinds of food, a big cake, and bowls of punch. It's great." The older brother shouts, "What?" The worker starts again. "Your brother has come. I heard you the first time. I just don't understand." Then he shakes his head and says to the hired hand, "You go back and tell my dad that I've got work to do." The older brother is furious. He stomps off into the barn. Before long, his father comes out to get him. The older son is busy mucking out stalls. When he sees his father, the older son says, "I hear you're celebrating, Dad, because your deadbeat son is back. What does he want now? My half of the estate?" The father says, "Look, son, I know you're angry, but I never thought we'd see your brother again. It's like he's come back from the dead." The son responds, "So let me get this straight. Your son takes half of what you own and wastes it on booze, gambling, drugs, and prostitutes. I know because I've seen his posts on Facebook. Now he returns empty-handed, wanting you to help him out, and you reward him by throwing him a party? But I, on the other hand, have worked faithfully on this farm all my life, and you never once threw me a party or did anything special like that for me. Don't you think I have a right to be angry? It's like I don't count. It's like I don't matter to you at all." His father counters, "Of course you matter. You are all I have, son. We work together every day on this farm to make it a success. All this is yours. But we had to celebrate. Your brother was dead to us, but he's alive. He had lost his way, but now he has come home. Come on in, grab some food, and celebrate with us." There are at least two questions we should ask as we read the scripture. One, what does this passage reveal to us about God? And two, what does it say about us? Obviously, the father represents God in this story, but he does not act like a typical father. First, no father in his right mind would give a rebellious and immature son half his estate. That would be foolish. But then again, look at what God has given so many of us. The median American household income of $70,000 is more than the household income of 97.6% of the world's population. The typical American is in the top 2.4% of the wealthiest people on earth. Perhaps God is more generous than wise in pouring out blessings on all of us. Secondly, a typical father would have been greatly offended by such a request. There was an incident reported a few years ago. This happened in the Middle East. A son asked his father for his inheritance. The father literally beat him and ran him out of town. Instead of bringing him up on charges, all the townspeople applauded the father's actions. What an impudent and disrespectful request to demand your inheritance while your father is still living. Third, the father in our story is so different from us because of his gracious love and for his wayward son. Even though the younger son has disowned his father and wasted half of his estate, the father runs to embrace him when he returns. The story tells us that God's grace and love boggle our minds. Divine mercy and grace extend far beyond our comprehension. It's incredible the way God always accepts us back no matter what we've done. Where do you see yourself in this story? Is today a homecoming? A coming back to God for you? We all find ways of wandering off. There are times we turn our backs on God and go our own way. When we turn back to God, the Lord runs toward us with open arms. What a beautiful picture of God's grace. Or do you see yourself as the older brother? Like the scribes and the Pharisees, we think we are good people. We see ourselves as faithful to God. We give and we serve, and we've been doing that for years. Perhaps we feel unappreciated by God. Perhaps we feel like the prodigal gets undeserved mercy and grace while we trudge on in the trenches unnoticed, undervalued. Maybe we would prefer justice over mercy, at least when it comes to others. God does not reject anyone, but all who come to God will be forgiven and accepted, both the prodigal and the resentful older brother. A Sunday school teacher was reading this story of the prodigal son to his class. He was clearly emphasizing the resentment the older brother expressed toward his returned brother. When the story was finished, he asked the class, "Now, who was really sad when the prodigal son came home?" After a few minutes of silence, one little boy raised his hand and said, "The fatted calf." He's got a point. When it comes to the older brother, the story leaves us hanging. Did the other brother go in and join the party? Why is the parable left open-ended? Because we provide the ending to the story. Will we go in and join the party? That is the question the church must answer. Will we be known as judgmental? That's the church's reputation, and I'm talking about church overall. Or will we celebrate those who have made bad choices, but by God's grace have made it back? We, the church, are called to act like the loving Father in our story. We're not to be in the business of judging and rejecting others, but in the ministry of acceptance, always offering grace, love, and mercy to those who are willing to come home. James Moore tells the story of Jessica, a 16-year-old in his church. She was beautiful and spoke for the youth in a Sunday evening service. Moore was impressed by what she had to say. She was obviously a young woman of faith and a person who had her head on straight and would be successful in life. Moore says the next morning he received a call from Jessica's mother. She had collapsed that morning and could not walk. She had to be taken to the hospital by ambulance. It turns out that Jessica had received a phone call just before her medical episode. She was told that another student had blackballed her from getting into a sorority. Even though her symptoms were clearly caused by this rejection, they were real. She actually could not walk and was very weak. The physicians were sure that she was not faking. Reverend Moore visited her and then called the president of the youth group, a young man named Ronnie. Ronnie said he would take care of it. That afternoon, Ronnie and 20 other young people crowded into Jessica's room. Each had a gift, balloons, candy, cards in their hands, and love in their hearts. Ronnie stepped up as the spokesman of the group. He said to her, "Jessica, God don't never blackball nobody, and neither do we." Ronnie did not have the best grammar, but he had excellent theology. It was just what the doctor ordered. Jessica began to laugh and smile. The next day she was stronger and was able to walk, and Jessica was released from the hospital. And she was made better by love. She was healed by acceptance. God is always accepting us, although others, even family and friends, may reject us. When we come to God, when we come home, the Lord jumps off the porch and runs to meet us and embraces us. All is forgiven. This is the gospel, isn't it? God loves us and accepts us and then sends us out as healers, as ministers of acceptance, as servants of mercy, as instruments of God's grace.